Okay, this is Exposé, and I'm your regular host, Tony Akinyemi. It's my honor again to be your host today. I believe you've been having a swell time every Monday at 8 p.m. Nigerian time and on all our platforms, on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. And today we have another exciting episode of Exposé where we reveal, unveil, and expose truth that will help you on your wellness journey. And I'm honored today to have an international guest, an expert in naturopathy and natural medicine. We've interviewed her before. This is, I think, the third time that we're bringing her on this program. We are honored to have her one more time. She's a woman of many parts, originated from somewhere in Europe and traveled through somewhere in North America, and now has ended up for the meantime in Nigeria. So she is European, she is American, she is Nigerian, everything rolled into one. She has a PhD in natural medicine, naturopathy, and she's also the CEO of the Undermed companies. And there is this device, the Undermed device that we've talked about in the past, which has been very useful in addressing so many issues on the health landscape, in helping people to get well, get strong, and get going. And today we're going to be talking about something very interesting. We're going to be talking about brain health, mental health, and the role that this Undermed device can play in helping to achieve that goal. I was talking with a doctor in the United States sometimes recently, and I was asking him questions about brain health and mental health and what have you. And I said, somebody did a brain MRI, and they said in that MRI result that the white matter in the brain was deteriorating and needed to be rebuilt. So the person was concerned. So I asked this, my doctor friend, I said, what do you have to suggest for someone going through this to improve the white matter in the brain? And he said, well, nobody is using up to 10% of their brain in the first place. So he said, so brain, you still have 80% left. So you can't even finish using the 80% before you die. So why bother? Why worry yourself? So today we'll be hearing the perspective of our special guest on this program today. And that is Dr. Silvia Binder. Please, wherever you are, I want you to give him a shout out and a welcome to Exposé today.
It's such a pleasure being with you again, Reverend Tony. You are a man of enlightenment. You have been bringing hope, truth, through education, and options for people that go beyond that which we know. And just as we only use the brain about, they say, 1% at this time of humanity, we really don't know what we don't know, and therefore it is a very small percentage of what we know. So it's important that we keep on educating ourselves and looking outside the rabbit hole. Keep that nose out, those eyes, and use the brain too. That 1%. Try. But I want to separate the brain to two brains. There's the innate brain, and then there's the intellectual brain.
Right.
And so the 1% relates to the intellectual brain, and of course, the more you learn, the more you know you don't know, the more you will actually raise the percentage.
Right.
And I think it is important, especially with mental health, which is our topic today. It is important to get rid of the illusion of self. So I talked about this, way before we had religion, and other Stoicism talks about it. We need to come to realize that there's so much more than just us in these bodies. So when we do, we become more mindful of that which is around us, because when we kick one thing, it has a ripple effect. So that it cannot just be us, right? It cannot just be one. I'm stopping here. Maybe you
All
want
right.
to say something. I'm getting lost already.
Thank you very much. So this is where how I like us to proceed today. First of all, would you give us a little bit understanding your perspective on the anatomy of the brain and different parts of the brain and how they function and the different things that our anatomical brain, the intellectual brain, what are the different functions and what are the different compartments, the different components? That's the first one I'd like us to educate us on. And the second one would be, what are the different pathologies, different kinds of disorders that actually affect the brain at the end of the day? And then we would then proceed to look at different approaches, in helping those who may be dealing with such disorders, how they could bounce back, how they could improve their brain power, brain health, and what have you.
I'm going to keep this as brief as I possibly can be on the anatomy of the brain, since I'm not a neurologist, and it is a neurologist that would discuss these components. So that's important to know. And it's the neurosurgeons who would then open the brain or make decisions upon viewing CAT scans and MRIs to see if there's let's call it a blockage, a scar tissue, a swelling, a fluid buildup in the brain. So typically we speak about the two major lobes, the right and the left side of the brain, and they have different functions. The right side is the analytical, the mathematical, the let's call it the more intellectual side of making decisions.
Right.
In a what?
I said the logical part of the brain.
That's right. Then we have the left side, which is the complement, which is the creative, the emotional, the one that often gets neglected with those that are in the field of science, right? So the importance is to balance both, to use both of the brilliance, and the brain. While neurologists will probably disagree with me, they say, well, you cannot transplant the brain, so it's the most important organ in the body. Well, it's not so, I say. The brain is overrated. And of course, the brain is a brilliant supercomputer and acts as a controlling agent in the body. It is responsible for communication, let's say, for giving orders to our cells, our tissue, and our organs. So if you will, you have a computer and you have the software, and then you have hardware. So the hardware is your brain. The hardware is your let's say the hardware means it's a supercomputer, right? It's a motherboard and semiconductors, and so that's brilliant, because it can do so many functions, so many control mechanism regulating it at the same time. And then you have the software, which is everything else that has to do with our biology, if I may compare it in such manners. And so I've been out in the world, and I had the opportunity to spend much time with Dr. Valerie Hunt, who wrote brilliant books, and then she was a UCLA professor for 40 years and then emeritus professor. And she proved that there is a big thing was the bioenergetic field, which goes beyond physiology, meaning which goes beyond our body.
Right.
And she also, her theory, and I carry on her legend. She died at the age of 96. She lived in California. I want to carry it on that yes, there is the brain and it's brilliant, But we must not underestimate that every one of our 70 trillion cells has sort of a mini brain.
Okay.
And we call it the mind.
Mm.
So the brain can be brilliant, but if it's not communicating to anything that can act upon receiving the communication and put it into action,
Right.
it is worthless.
Mm.
Correct?
That's right. Yeah.
So we need to focus on all of the cells in the body. And mental health is quite brilliant because while we have the diagnosis and symptoms that are defined, we can help it from a different angle. You know, we have one side of the coin, and we turn the coin and we see another side. So I want to talk about that in detail today. So we have the diseases you asked. The second question was diseases that go into what we consider mental health issues. And there are a few, such as, especially today in 2020, after all that we've gone through, after some freedom that was taken, after, I want to say, the pink glasses have fallen to the ground, and we see what has been all along, but there is more clarity. And we come to more of a realization that depresses us, that puts us into the ship of, boy, who are we? How much freedom do we have? And how can I make myself happy in everything that's going on with all these millions of different pieces of information? So the prevalent one today, I would say, is depression that potentially may lead into severe depression and suicidal thought. Then we have diseases such as dementia. Part of that is Alzheimer's. We have diseases as Parkinson's is considered. You know, it's a fine line because it is a mental disorder, but it's also an immune disorder. So it's a psychoneuroimmunology disorder. But that branch in medicine has not become mainstream yet. But it makes a lot of sense in how we will discuss this further. It will make sense to the listeners. So, so those are many. I mean, there's many other forms of mental disease. Addiction is another one that I want to say could be a child of mother depression. You know, I'm fulfilling something that is unfulfilled within me. So that's another one. So addiction is a big one. You know, I'm currently involved in a very strange project, and that is with PMI, Philip Morris International, through being a faculty member of a medical wellness association, and it is that they're coming out with a new product that will help smokers to reduce the side effects by like almost 90%, which is brilliant. But you know, of course, their goal is now to help people to roll out programs to help stop them with the addiction. But even if you're addicted, you can now have less side effects from that addiction. But you know, it's getting to the root of, you know, why are people addicted? Why do people have white masses in their brain? Why do people have a fluid buildup, whether it's the brain or whether it's anywhere else in the body? And that is where let's say physics comes into play with an MRI CAT scan seeing the white mass, but that's only seeing it. It's important in our diagnostic aspect. But now we have a method with the treatment of such disorders, and the most brilliant device. And you know, I have seen many devices, I've seen many approaches, and there's brilliant ones and there's not so brilliant ones. The not so brilliant ones are the ones that claim things that cannot be justified, that cannot be validated, and even on top of it, ones that are proving to have side effects. So we want to minimize that, right? So the ultimate technology using focused pulse electromagnetic fields in a personalized way will help us detect, let's call it now, I'm going to piggyback onto the white mass areas in the body, the dysfunctional areas, and which may be in places we have no clue because we're not taking an MRI of let's say your thigh, or maybe there is a mass which causes a constipated situation in other, going top up or bottom down, or whatever it's called, top down, bottom up. That's what it's called. So I have the ornament sitting next to me, and I can discuss in further detail, but I'm giving back to you now, throwing the ball back to you, to the studio in Lagos.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, let me help to summarize some of the things that you have already said for our viewers one more time. If I understood you very well, you were trying to distinguish between structural disorders in the brain and functional disorders in the brain, if I got you very right. And then you also highlighted some of the functional disorders as well as some of the structural disorders. The structural disorders could be like swellings in the brain, fluid accumulation in the brain, tumors in the brain. Those are structural issues, that's defects, so to speak. And then we have functional disorders like depression, like anxiety, like dementias. The dementias you mentioned, Alzheimer's disease, you mentioned Parkinson's disease, and what have you. And then you touched on something very significant, which I think we should focus a little bit more on today, and that is the issue of addictions. And I think addiction is a very big thing that is ruining many lives, many destinies, many families, many people's personal economies. When people get addicted to either habits or substances, and sometimes they realize that they're actually really addicted, and this addiction is taking them downhill, but they are helpless, so to speak. They want to be free. They cannot be free. Those of us who are men and women of the pulpit, we present the gospel of Jesus Christ for the power to set them free. You are presenting an on-demand device right now that can help such people to, receive some kind of therapy, so to speak, and be able to break out of that cycle. So today, I would have loved us to talk about anxiety too, but I don't think our time will permit. But maybe we can do a second episode, if you don't mind, so that we can look at addiction in the first episode and look at anxiety in the second episode. Okay, so I'm going to be focusing more on the addiction part of what you have put on the table today. Now, first and foremost, let me ask you pointedly, in your practice as a naturopath, as someone in the field of natural medicine, I do believe you must have come across people who have battled addiction. Could you just share one or two stories with us of people you have come across who have battled addiction and how your particular therapy or device has been able to help them through that?
Yes, I'll be happy to. I want to say that addiction, it has many forms. And I think the biggest addiction today is that of social media. And it is destroying your awareness of who you are and the potential of your creativity, and using that to good use. You are now with social media, you are more focused on being out there and watching everybody else and being observant and addicted to the information that may have nothing to do with your life. So that's something we need to tackle as a society. We need to be aware of it as parents. We need to limit the access and do it in a non-restrictive way, but in an educational way, so that children will understand this is the coming future. Is our children. They're the ones that carry the legends forward. But I've been so that's one big addiction that is bringing people into a big hole of depression, because they're no longer out there, no longer touching and being in the environment of another human or more humans. So that is a big one. But I've been treating very nasty addictions, and I do want to say that addiction in all of my experience in treating disease, it is the most difficult and that's the darkest disease that I've ever come across. So if you're dealing with people, and I'm talking about a patient, a young woman that was addicted to heroin, now that's a hard one. And that means not only treating them with on-demand, which helps to repattern, helps to send different signals to the brain and the little brains in every cell, but it helps to detoxify. It helps to get rid of the buildup of the drug abuse and substance, and helps to strengthen thereby the organs that are necessary to when you detox and you want to get rid of addiction, you got to bring up the organs of like liver and kidneys so they can stand strong as they're rebuilding the physiology, rebuilding the self, rebuild, because the self is low. The self, and there needs to be, there is ego, and we need to build ego because that's very small. That's why these people are addicted to all these kinds of drugs out there. They're depressed and they don't know who they are and the potential. So I treated with on-demand. I recommended that this young lady is being removed from the environment, because if you stay in the environment, you cannot possibly think of getting these people off the drug addiction, because they see the same friends or be in the same rhythm. So this young lady was moved to another country, moved to a different educational system, moved into, I also recommended that she gives to, it was a home for adult retardation, severely retarded adults that, they were drooling, they couldn't, they're not really here. They had the dysfunctions of all sorts. And she was enrolled for 6 months in helping these people, these very debilitated, brain debilitated people. And that, throws a whole nother thing to one's life, that you're now responsible for these people they're not cute looking people. They're not children that have health disorders. So that was I wanted to shock this young lady into something that is a reality in the world that we're dealing with, and her being able to reach out and help. And I changed the nutrition. So it's a social aspect, it's an environmental aspect, it is changing the patterns of one's life, it is changing the patterns of communication, brain, mind, organ, detoxing, balancing the nervous systems, creating a new self, and it was very successful. After those 6 months, she was off. She was at an institution for 1 week only until I got a hold of her. And she was, when I got her, nasty, difficult, not willing, detoxing. Can you imagine? And so I had to listen to a lot. I had to understand it wasn't about me, it's a disease. We need to understand this is not willing by this patient. And she, after that week of being in the clinic, coming to me, she was off the drugs completely. And I substituted also with a medical marijuana. I did that too. So that is a very, very little of hemp, and not smoking it with oils, so that was helpful. And then I can think of smoking addiction. There's thousands of practitioners just in Denmark alone, not thousands, sorry, hundreds of practitioners that treat just nicotine smoking addiction. Very successful, 1 to 3 treatments with on-demand. And why is that? Because we think we are able to, it's a habit, as you said. It's not just the nicotine, being addicted to it. It's a habit that when the right and the left brain hemispheres, they are communicating and creating this ongoing need to fulfill the habit. But if you can sever that communication, and I think that's what's happening when we do ornament, there's no more, talking. Oh, it's been 20 minutes. I need that cigarette again, right? So we can change that communication pathway. We put a new communication, a new language, and very, very successful. 95% success rate using ornament for smoking addiction. But smoking is such an uninteresting topic to me because we have bigger deals, bigger ordeals on the table, and that is alcohol. Alcohol is a much bigger problem, or pharmaceutical drugs is a much bigger problem than putting a stick in your mouth. I'm sorry. And if that stick is only tobacco and nicotine and not all the other cancer-causing factors, then I have no problem with putting a stick in your mouth. But stay away from the alcohol that is, widely promoted, widely sold, and nobody says anything about that. And so we also have shown that we can, of course, detox people, reduce the addiction. It's a sugar addiction, reduce the fungus, reduce the need for when you're building them with mindfulness, nutrition, detoxing the liver, detoxing the kidneys, or helping the kidneys detox better, and creating a new life for these addicted people.
Thank you very much, Doc. Thank you so much. If I heard you right, you have highlighted addiction to so many things today. I'll just highlight them very quickly before we go on a short break, and then we'll be back to continue this conversation. You mentioned social media addiction, which you said is a very big thing, and many people don't realize that they're addicted to social media, and that needs to be looked at so that they can be delivered and freed from the control that the social media gives upon people's minds. These days, mainstream media, social media have become mind controllers. They kind of control the minds of the population, and the population is not even realizing it. And everybody's just dancing to the tune that is being played on social media and on mainstream media. So there's a form of addiction in that regard that you highlighted. Secondly, you also mentioned addiction to substances, maybe to cocaine and such things like that. And then you mentioned tobacco addiction, which you said, well, it may be a problem, but it's not the biggest deal out there. You mentioned alcohol addiction as a bigger problem. That is because all over the place, advertisements are all over the place pushing alcohol as if it is a very harmless substance. And everybody is blasting on everybody's face every day on radio and television. We need to begin to look at the damage and the ruin that alcohol causes to people's health, people's economies, people's marriages, and people's lives in general. And then you mentioned pharmaceutical addiction, which is another thing. Some people are addicted to some kind of drugs. I know people who won't go to bed except they have taken some kind of paracetamol. They just believe it helps them to, get over all the aches and pains in their body so they could sleep, and they take it until they damage their kidneys. Many people don't realize that long-term use of simple paracetamol can cause kidney impairment, and they begin to go on dialysis thereafter. Then you also mentioned the big one, sugar addiction. A number of people are addicted to sugar, addicted to soft drinks and soda pop and all of that, and they don't even realize it. I was in those shoes in the past. I used to drink nothing less than 4 bottles of soft drinks per day, sometimes up to 7 bottles a day, before my health began to deteriorate, and I had to rethink that aspect of my life. And 2 months ago, I clocked 20 years that I stopped taking soft drinks. All right, we're going to go we're going to go on a short break right now, and then thereafter, when we come back, I'd like to begin by highlighting some of the things that you have suggested, things that you have done to help people out of addiction. I will highlight that, and then we will take it up from there. Don't go away, viewers. We'll be back very shortly. Welcome back, viewers. This is Exposé, and I'm your regular host, Tony Akinyemi. We're talking to Dr. Silvia Binder today, and she's sharing with us on brain health, mental health, but we're narrowing it down to addiction at this point, and we're going to be looking at her modalities in helping people to recover from addiction. Before we went on break, she actually identified different forms of addiction that people are addicted to. Of course, the list is not exhaustive. There are many other areas of addiction. But then she also went ahead to tell us what she has been doing or what she has done with some of her clients, who have had issues with addiction. And she told us about how detox is very important, detoxing the person who is addicted, whether it is emotional detoxification or detoxification from toxins that have entered into the system from the different kinds of substances, drugs, and what have you that people have been on. It's important that those things be removed from the body as part of the program to free that person from addiction. And then, of course, she mentioned the aspect of rebuilding the organ systems of the person's body, rebuilding the liver, rebuilding the kidneys, rebuilding the cells, and helping them to do their job that they're supposed to do. They've got to be on top of the game for the organs in the body to be able to help the individual. And then, of course, she also emphasized the social and environmental aspect of addiction, where sometimes it may be necessary to take the person from the environment into a new environment so that that person can have the chance to be able to bounce back. And so the person can come away from the influence in the environment where the person was became addicted in the first instance. Because if the person remains in the same environment, the environment could be reinforcing the addiction. And so sometimes it's necessary to remove the person from that unwholesome environment. Then she emphasized the aspect of nutrition, that nutrition is very, very important to nourish the body and help the body to eat correctly, help the person to eat correctly, and help to rejuvenate the body. Then the issue of supplementation is also important. She mentioned, I believe you were talking about CBD oil there when you talked about medical marijuana. Okay, so CBD oil and a few other supplements that may be very necessary in helping people to recover. So we have the social aspect, we have the environmental aspect, we have the nutritional factor, we have the supplements, and then we have the detox area. Then you mentioned the particular case that you mentioned, that it took approximately 6 months or thereabout for the person to recover. Now, let me ask the next rider question on that. On the average, is this 6 months recovery period typical for almost every case of addiction, or is it only for this particular type of addiction? I'm looking at a situation where one person is addicted to tobacco, another one is addicted to alcohol, another one is addicted to sugar, another one is addicted to a particular bad habit, and you want to help all of them. Do we say the average recovery period for all of them is 6 months, or does it vary from type to type?
Yeah, no, what I said was that after 6 months, when she was stable, that's what we're looking for. That's what I look for. I don't just want to help them to stop for a few weeks and they go right back into it. So when I see that they are clean for 6 months, I can now say they have overcome the addiction. I want to be honest about this, right? So it didn't take 6 months. When I got her, she was off all drugs. So I worked with her right away of reducing or just eliminating. She no longer had the heroin because that was a heroin drug that she was taking. So I hope it was oxycodone. So I hope I make myself understood that it didn't take 6 months. She was clean right away, but clean, what does clean mean? Because all the substances are still in the body. So I would say, just as I tell people that when I test them through the nutritional inflammatory response to certain foods and herbs and drinks, a broccoli might be very healthy, but it may not be healthy for you at this time. And when I test it through and I tell you to stop eating broccoli because it inflames, it keeps you in a loop of inflammation. And and you stay away from it, I tell you, for 3 months, because it will only take 3 months to stabilize your, let's say, the liver as an organ. It only takes 3 months for the liver to replenish itself, to be a new liver in 3 months. And then you have outgrown that inflammatory response to the broccoli.
Thank you. You have highlighted, and clarified some of the aspects that I probably didn't get very well. We thank you for that. Yeah. So now I want us to go to 2 aspects. One is the role of the undermed device in helping someone with addiction. If a patient or a client shows up in your clinic, for example, and he says, hey, I know I'm addicted to this, I want to be free, and I need some kind of therapy from you as an expert, what process would you take the person through? You've highlighted quite a number of them, but I want to see how the undermed device keys into that process. That is one. But before you answer that, I want to highlight something, particularly for the benefit of our viewers, that before a person can get help for any type of addiction, I think the starting point is dealing with the issue of denial. Some people don't even agree that they have addiction problems. If you don't accept that you are addicted to something and that you need help, then you may not be able to get the needed help. For example, somebody is addicted to sugar, addicted to soft drinks, and he or she doesn't even realize it. It's in denial. Say, no, I don't have a problem with sugar. I don't have a problem with soft drinks. And yet, every day he gulps these things and he doesn't know, he does not realize that he's addicted. And so I think the first point for a person to get help is to realize that they've got a problem and that there is solution available, and be willing to access that solution. So now we come to you. Somebody has now accepted, I'm addicted, I need help. You, as an expert, as a naturopathic doctor, as a practitioner of the undermed device, how would you take the person through, and how does the undermed key into that therapy?
Thank you. Yes. So, of course, I will take an intake. What is the biggest problem with that patient? I would start very gently. And then I would just bring them to the undermed. There's no offense, there's no harm, there's no exposing something that they wouldn't feel comfortable with, right? It's very, very, I want to bring this to the attention of the listeners, that this is a non-invasive approach, and emotionally non-invasive. So we would scan, or I would scan the patient and find, so this is treatment, but I palpate the radial pulse as the frequencies are being emitted through 4 applicators. This is one of them. And then I scan the body to find areas of inflammation or infections, even with addiction. There could be areas of build-up of waste products, toxins, such as the substance. The substances, they're not just being peed or pooed out, right? Or sweated out. They're hanging around. So when I start treatment, they start to get a little high because of the toxins are starting to get activated and then released. So I will take them. So you saw the scanning and then placing the applicators in the areas where the body needs most help. I will take the patient through 4 modules. The first module being the organs that are most affected and need treatment with frequencies that point to, let's say, the liver and the kidney, because that is what's coming up in me, palpating the pulse and the autonomic nervous system giving me the information they needed frequencies for treatment that correlate to kidney and liver. The second module, indication modules, we have an addiction program, we have nervous system programs to help balance the nervous system. That is truly the most important before detoxing. can even take place properly, we need to balance the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems. If we don't do that, it's like dealing with a hard wall. And a hard wall is like things being frozen, stagnated. And with stagnation and frozen sclerosis, I would call it, is hardened, and nothing can move. Meaning fluids can't move, energy can't move, so you can't do anything with that patient. So that has priority. And very simply with the on-the-mat, it's like meditation is not easy, right? To sit, meditation is a process. It's not just one meditation, that's it. So to get yourself to meditate is hard. To get yourself to a level of brain waves, to become a meditative and mindful individual is very hard. The on-the-mat, within a few minutes, you're already, you're breaking down walls so gently that the person gets very relaxed quickly, and the balancing of the nervous system happens without the patient doing anything. Because we're working with the brilliance of the autonomic nervous system that is responsible for the involuntary actions, such as your heartbeat. You don't tell your heart to beat, it beats automatically, God willing. And so we can override what we think we can control. Ultimately, we're not controlling anything, right? The illusion of free will. And so we put the patient at ease right away, and we're dealing with a balanced nervous system quickly. And from there, we have emotional programs with brainwave organ programs. Very interesting, scar removal, because scars can be a problem. And so I would find the programs that are most related to this individual sitting in front of me, not to the addiction, but to the life journey concerning their health. And that is emotional, mental, spiritual, and physical health. So I would tell the patient what I'm finding and then treating. The third module we'll take them through is the microbial module to find what fungus or what bacteria, what virus or parasite is causing the biggest issue. You see, only because you are diagnosed with malaria doesn't mean that malaria is your biggest issue. Why are you responding to the plasmodium in an insect, a mosquito that bites you? Why are you responding and your spouse is not responding, although also bitten? So it's an immune response, and why is your immune response not acting as well as it could, right? So there's other microbial issues in the forefront, so one feeds the other. It's a whole community. If you have fungus, you'll have virus, you have bacteria, you have an overgrowth of parasites, because you're providing the right environment, the right microbiome for the viruses, bacteria, parasites to live in. So I've said that before, but it's a great picture to give to the viewers. In Germany, we say, when the fish gets sick, don't treat the fish, but treat the water in which it swims. And that has to do exactly with what I'm talking about. It's not necessarily the parasite you need to treat, although of course in acute situations, you need to take care of the parasite. But then consequently, we need to treat the gut and the fluid and your microbiome so it is healthier, so that the fluids in the system are healthier. And I was interviewed by NTA about a year ago on mental health. And as we got talking, I said to them, in order to treat your brain, you got to treat the gut first, because there's a gut-brain connection. And the reporter was looking at me like, huh? So, and the fourth module, and then I give to you again, I've been saying a lot already. The fourth module deals with better assimilating the good nutrients that you get from your foods and also from your supplementation. You take it, but what if you're not absorbing it properly? So we can also help the body to accelerate the absorption of your magnesium, your vitamin D3, your CoQ10, and all the wonderful foods and minerals that you take into yourself. You're muted.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Doc. I muted myself because I didn't want my voice to interfere with yours. Okay, right. So at this point, what you have said, if I could put them together, is that the UnderMed device helps you to detect, as it were, areas in the client's body, the patient's body, that are begging for special attention. You want to know if there is, for example, the microbiome. You want to see whether there is fungal infection, bacterial infection, and address that. You want to know why the body is weak enough to succumb to the Plasmodium parasite or any other parasite for that matter. When other people in the house are not succumbing, why is your own body succumbing? That means that your immune system probably is weak or in a bad shape. And then you want to help the body to also assimilate the nutrients from their food and from their supplements, so that, I mean, it's not just enough to ingest these things. We have to be sure that your body is able to utilize them, because if they are not bioavailable to your body, then you're just garbaging it in and garbaging it out. Your body doesn't derive any benefit from it. So it's important that you're able to process your food, your nutrients, your supplements, and utilize the nutrients in there and the different ingredients that are beneficial to the body to help the body to function optimally. Okay, if I got you right. Now, I was reading a book not too long ago where the author was talking about the role that fungus, yeast, plays in addiction. And the author was talking about the fact that many people who are addicted to sugar in particular most likely have yeast problems. They have systemic candidiasis or systemic yeast infection. And he believes that if we are able to address the yeast issue, because yeast feasts on sugar. And if you have a lot of yeast in your system, as you take carbohydrate and your body breaks it down to glucose, the yeast will steal most of the glucose. So your brain becomes starved of glucose, as it were. And as soon as the brain is not getting enough glucose, the brain begins to call for more sugar, more glucose. And that's why you see people always craving sweet things, craving sugar, craving soft drinks, craving carbohydrates, white flour products, and so on, things that can easily break down into sugar, because the brain is not getting enough glucose because the yeast in the body is already stealing most of the glucose. And so the person keeps eating and eating. Now, what are your thoughts on that?
So true. And I want to share a nice story. You know, in my beginning days of studying naturopathy, because my first son, he prompted me to go on that path, having helped him in overcome a thrombus in the heart and avoiding open heart surgery. I have a third child, you know, my son Benjamin, who always had recurring ear infections. And back then I didn't know better. And I was just like the masses, and I gave antibiotics prescribed by his pediatrician. And of course, the antibiotic you wouldn't put in the ear where the problem is, you would have to swallow it. It goes through intestinal tract, and then maybe at some point it reaches the ear. And so he was constantly on the antibiotics whenever he had an ear infection. So UnderMed came into my life. And so I said to myself, let me try. I started to learn about fungal overgrowth 20 years ago, and we have 207.1 is the index number, frequency 750 hertz. I noticed by heart. A lot of people respond to it, but I wanted to make an experiment. I took my 2.5-year-old son back then, and I put him on the UnderMed 5 minutes per day for 5 days in a row. I put the neck applicator on him, and I put just the little matrix applicator, the M4, onto his little body, his upper abdominal, or it was actually the whole abdominal region because he was only 2.5 years old. And I treated him just for 5 minutes with the Candida albicans frequency. And he was always craving cookie and sweet, and after 5 days, it was a Monday through a Friday, I rigorously treated him, only 5 minutes a day. And then I witnessed my child. There's no placebo effect, okay? I didn't say anything. And you cannot tell your child to go now. And what he did, he opens the fridge and he would go to grab carrots and peppers, and he would grab onions and start cutting onions and eat them raw. Garlic, he started loving garlic. I was shocked. He was no longer craving cookies, but he was craving natural food such as just vegetables and onions. What 2-year-old eats onions raw and garlic raw? But I witnessed it, and I tell you that most chronic disease involves candida in some form. It may also involve mildew that you're exposed to, so other forms of fungus that and mildew you're breathing in. The fungus is not just yeast infections that women have that they cannot overcome with the anti-yeast capsules and creams. It will come recurring because you're feeding your body with the sugar that you can control yourself. Once you become aware, it's very hard to stop. The on-the-med can help very quickly in changing that addiction because you are starting to crave. Detoxing the fungus will help you to stop craving the sugars. It's not about you no longer have any fungus in your body. You will always have some fungus in your body. It will have its role in your biology. But it's the overgrowth that's the problem. And when people come to me and say, I have Lyme disease and we need to treat Borrelia burgdorferi or whatever else they connect with it, I tell you, in 20 years of treating Lyme patients, which is, I want to say, the most modern disease around the globe in the Northern Hemisphere, especially in the US, I've never found Borrelia to be in the front of the treatment. It's always fungal or parasitic involvement.
Thank you so very much. We could go on and on and on and on, but I think our time is up for this episode, and we have to, call it a day here. But
I wanted to say one more thing.
Okay.
One of the biggest other addictions that you need to hear it. Your listeners need to hear it because it is a serious one and nobody talks about it. They will not confide in anyone. But when you start to become depressed and you start to lose your hair at the age of 20 as a man, a lot of it is addiction to porn videos. And into that, I want to say that, masturbation is a medical term, okay? And it is something that men, women should not fall into. They need to stop themselves because it is a very unhealthy thing. And emotionally and mentally to be addicted to that, to watch these stimulations, sexual stimulations is not a good thing. It is a very serious concern, especially for those societies where it's very conservative, where your belief system. So that brings all kinds of problems with itself, with the internet available and the social media, and the nastiness that comes along with that addiction. So I wanted to mention that, just to throw it out there, that mothers, please try to find a way to discuss this with your sons, or young men, please listen to me. This is going to be a big problem. You don't want to lose your hair early. You don't want to be exhausted and not have energy and cannot sleep. But that addiction can cause a lot of a ripple effect. But this I give to you.
Thank you so very much. Thank you so very much for bringing this on board. Many people don't realize it, and I'm so happy that you highlighted it. The issue of pornography and the issue of masturbation, two kinds of addictions that have health implications. And you mentioned one of them is that it makes the hair to fall off prematurely. People in their 20s and 30s losing their hair. You also talked about, kind of lack of energy as a result of engaging in these things. The Bible actually speaks against some of these things because God loves us and he doesn't want us to endanger ourselves. So he wants us to live a life that is abundant, that is full, that is happy. And so we need to engage in healthy practices. Thank you so very much, Dr. Silvia Binder, for being with us again today. We're going to have you for another episode where we'll be talking about anxiety, depression, and we'll look at the way out of those. I hope our viewers have enjoyed today's interview with Dr. Binder. She has highlighted the issue of addictions. She has highlighted the different types of addictions, and she has also put on the table how to get out of addiction, how to break free from addiction. Because if you don't, down the line, you're going to pay for it. But we don't want you to get to that point before you realize that you really need help. This is the time to call for help. And thank goodness, there are many sources of help out there. You can reach out to those who can offer you real help. I mean, Jesus Christ, the Son of the living God, says, if the Son shall make you free, you shall be free indeed. And then there are professionals in their various fields who will be happy to work with you to take you through different kinds of therapies to set you free from everything that is binding you. So you can live a free life. You can have true liberty in the way that you live your life so you can fulfill your full potentials and be a blessing to humanity, a blessing to your family, a blessing to your community. So you are an asset and not a liability. Everybody is not looking upon you and saying, what is this again? But everybody looks at you and they feel blessed to be related with you. That's how we should all live our lives. Once again, it's been Exposé. Don't forget that what we need is not more medication, but more education. And the best prescription is knowledge. Thank you for being with us today. See you same time next week on this same program. God bless you.